This is the headline that's garnering all the attention today.
All the evidence shows there's an investment boom going on.
Markets are looking for clues about the health of the job market.
Artificial intelligence absolutely has already been a disrupting force.
People are right to question how much longer this bull market can run.
With stocks rising, fueled by big tech and easing trade tensions.
This week, the Fed voted to lower interest rates another quarter of a point.
Take a look at futures. Now a little bit of a mixed bag. We've actually seen the Dow tick lower.
Oh boy, here we go again.
It's time to tune out the noise and tune into great information with A Steward's View. Expect valuable economic updates, investing techniques, and planning concepts that will move you to be wise and decide well. You'll be equipped in a stewardship mindset, managing God's resources 1 week at a time. You can listen to this podcast and previous episodes at astewardsview.com. Now, here's your host, Aaron Kolkman.
Welcome back. I'm Aaron Kolkman. That's Chaz Louder. Here's Paul Larsen, and this is A Steward's View. I'm so glad you joined us again. You can check out this week's economic and market roundup today at astewardsview.com/blog. That's astewardsview.com/blog. Today on ASV, we want to dial into the art and science of giving. We'll work to offer both the knowledge and the wisdom associated with giving and seek to bring you from the concept of, what is it? How is it? What does it look like? And then to some conclusions about it. Okay. So concept to conclusions. Our mission here on ASV is to help you level up your financial decisions. That is, we want to help you move further in, towards being wise and deciding well. So, our effort then is to bring light to your financial decisions as stewards, you, your family, and your professionals. Before we get going, let's take a minute. Let's examine our work in the context of God's word about stewardship. So we hear about the cheerful giver in 2 Corinthians 9:6-7, which reads, "The point is this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." So principles there, Paul, there are many: reaping and sowing, voluntarily giving, cheerfulness, not compulsion, heart attitude, right? Thoughts on that?
Well,
brief but powerful.
It does seem like the heart attitude is the most important. God doesn't need us or our money, right? He is all sufficient. So when Paul says God wants a cheerful giver, I think that's a real important thing, because what if we don't feel cheerful? I mean, I believe there's a warning there for people who do give feeling under compulsion, right? And feeling just strictly a sense of duty. Imagining what they could have done with that money. That's really a dangerous thing. So if you're giving, the giving's not bad, but maybe we need to pray about a cheerful heart. He goes on to say in verse 8 that God's able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. So God is going to supply what you need. And he's promised that over and over in Scripture, right? But giving is an opportunity to really show God that you're depending on him to meet your needs and make you happy. He's not depending on you to fund ministries.
And there's such a gap there, is there, Paul, in how we view what stewardship is even? Right? I mean, don't a lot of us hear the word stewardship and think of, well, I've got some, I've got my P&L here for a business or maybe a nonprofit or a church. And what was my, what's the expense analysis? Right?
Okay.
How good a steward was I at managing expenses? Right?
Okay.
That's a common question.
Yeah.
On the other side of the P&L or the income side, how much did I generate?
Okay.
Right? But fundraising in the church, how much did we bring in? Right?
Yeah.
Is that good stewardship?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad stewardship, but it's not the point, is it?
Stewardship would mean managing the resources and put in your hands. That doesn't necessarily mean have a better program for pulling in more resources.
Mm-hmm.
Is it? So I think stewardship is a word that means a lot of things to a lot of people. And many times it comes down to fundraising, unfortunately.
Mm.
I've seen that happen. There's an organization that was very big a few years ago called, such and such Stewardship Foundation. But if you go to the conference, 80% of the conference was little breakout sessions on how to get little old ladies to respond to your direct mail campaign and send money in, right? It wasn't stewardship. It was fundraising.
Mm.
It wasn't even philanthropy in my mind, because philanthropy usually is very intentional as well. So we want to be careful about this language, because stewardship is a real important term. But we don't want to combine it or mix it up with fundraising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's a lot of definition of terms that we could go into. There's a lot of discussion about what stewardship is and isn't. We did some of that, in fact, multiple episodes. So we spent some time in that last year in 2025. I know that this year we have some more specific things we want to bring out. So in this episode, as we get closer to our core content, we're going to talk about how this heart of giving relates to the act of giving, and then what giving looks like, right, with some technical truth that we want to consider. Okay, so, but yeah, the cheerful giver, the mindset of stewardism, bringing that with us as we go. These are all it fits with what a steward's view is about. That is, that we're stewards or managers, not the ultimate owners of our financial picture, not the master of our own destiny, as is commonly thought. Yep. Our financial resources then are ours for a short time, and our decisions can flow from that perspective. So before we get going into core content, let's take and listen to our noise segment. We'll check that out and also take a commercial break.
Investors have holdings scattered under multiple logins. Now there's one place to put it all together. Your entire portfolio in one place. Every asset house, every holding, every transaction, every day. It's called Fusion. Fusion means ongoing portfolio aggregation, without a contract and without a hitch. This important tool can put all your investments into a single view with a universal login, provided by Morningstar and sponsored by Fideer Advisors. Fusion gives its users the benefit of a constant monitor and quarterly risk-reward reports on the entire portfolio. So take a break and take advantage of this valuable view. Register now at fideeradvice.com. Just click Fusion at the top of the page or type in fideeradvice.com/fusion. And now back to A Steward's View.
Chaz.
All right, Aaron. All right, Paul.
Hey,
we are into our noise segment, and I've got a couple. Paul, you weren't here with us last week, but I had 3 to choose from, and we're kind of left with our remaining 2. This kind of battle of the financial minds. And so here's what we got. We got Robert Kiyosaki, and he says, our stock's actually a smart investment. Okay, these are shorts, all right? The Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad guy. Then we've got the guru of all financial gurus, getting out of debt, Mr. Dave Ramsey, and his little reel is called The 4 Types of Funds I Would Invest With. I'll let you guys arm wrestle over who's going to get to pick and which one you're going to get to do. So you tell me, and we'll go to one of those guys.
Paul, you're the guest here, so why don't we honor what you want to talk about?
There you go.
You know, what's the lesser of 2 evils, Paul?
Oh, wow.
I really...
They're not evils. I don't think.
I think you know my answer. I think Kiyosaki's got some helpful guidelines. I think Dave Ramsey has a book on budgeting. Okay, so if we're past the budgeting place, I've never seen him or his predecessor, by the way, Larry Burkett. I've never seen any of their investment advice really pan out, or even their economic projections pan out. So
so we're going to go with Mr. Kiyosaki. Okay, it says our stock's actually a smart investment, and here is I'll pull up the screen here.
Touch a stock. I don't touch mutual funds. I don't touch ETFs. You know why? Because it only makes them rich. If you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it says your house is not an asset. Why? Because for 30 years, when you own that house, you're sending money to the bank, right? So when you have a 401k or a retirement plan and all this, and let's say you start at 20 and you're going to retire at 65, for 45 years, you're going to send that money to buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and savings. Stupid. I want my assets putting money in my pocket. I don't want to buy a house that takes money from my pocket. Most people's retirement plans aren't assets, they're liabilities because they're sucking cash out of that person's pocket for 45 years. I wouldn't.
There you go. That is Mr. Kiyosaki. What are your thoughts, guys?
What is he recommending? That's a real question.
I think he mainly recommends private investments in local businesses. I think that's his main gig. Either way, it is the lesser of two noises, I think. But he does use a lot of hyperbolic language. It gets clicks. I think he doesn't. It's just you have to startle people in order to get their attention, and that's what he's doing. He's startling people, and you can't paint with such a broad brush like that. That's ridiculous.
It is.
It doesn't only make someone else rich. It doesn't do that. There are certainly unknown risks, and there are certainly beneficiaries that are invisible, but that's not the same as it all being for naught. So he's good at selling books, just like Dave Ramsey is. And but it's noise. It's absolutely noise.
So is there something that we can take away from Kiyosaki or someone like Ramsey? Because I think both these guys in one way or another have helped people, in Ramsey's case, get out of debt. Kiyosaki may be thinking differently about investments. What is the silver lining, if you will? Because people, why I don't disagree that Robert's trying to sell books. Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's got to be like a 20-year-old book. He references it as his kind of thesis type work, but what are your thoughts over the macro level? I mean, yes, it's hyperbolic, yes, it's clickbait, but is there something that's a principle to take away from that?
Well, okay, there's almost nothing he said that I would take away from that, Chaz, to be honest with you. Right.
Sure.
Especially the part about, and I'll reference it this way. When I come out and say, I don't mind dividend investing. Here are the things that I think are beneficial about dividend investing. Okay. Maybe a month ago or February, we did this right on our kind of a initial run of ASV Plus focused on investing. Okay. Which is what a lot of these things are about. That's fine. I got that. But I don't mind it. I really don't. Dividend investing has pros and cons, right? So does total return investing. Now, let me tell you why I think total return investing is a better solution. Okay. And that's what we did. That's the entire episode. So the trouble I have, and I love this, I love doing this. It's so much fun to me. But I'm just say it again to anybody listening. Let's level up our conversation, right? Let's not level it down. And Chaz, that's why we need these noise segments, because we're getting this black and white, either or, polarized, divisive, garbage. Right? Please don't buy the book just based on that, right? If I publish a book, which we finally will again this summer, right? Ran out of time last year. It's not going to have the either ors. It's going to have the mindset. It's going to have the framework. It's going to be designed to enhance decisions, right? So I would argue that he's got something to sell, and he's not saying what it is. And if you don't want to come out and say what it is, then I'm going to the next thing. Right. And that includes anybody that comes on. I don't care how many millions of dollars you made. The reason I chose Buffett last time is he's not divisive. He's got a process. He's got opinions. Right. But he's not coming out saying, look, dude, do it my way. No. Here's some ideas. Let's talk about ideas. I love how Newt does that. Right. And I'm not even a political person. So those are my thoughts. Like, I'm sorry he doesn't like fees charged by, packaged vehicles. Right. Then go buy some all-American companies, buy 30 of them, have a concentrated portfolio, and look what happens. Because over the last century, you generated 10% or better dividends reinvested over the long run. And if what you're not proposing can do better than that, first, let's hear what it is, right? And then second, how's it done? Let's measure it. Let's get out the calculators. Let's get the dorks out and let's go through it, right? But in the meantime, can we? I don't know. Maybe I can get his logins or something and add this.
I guess one of my takeaways is I think he's right that people call their houses an investment, right? I think that's an important thing to struggle with because it is a liability. For a long time, it's a much bigger liability than it is an asset. Now, he's talking about financial returns. It's forced savings, and he has no time for savings. Okay, if you understand the context of how he writes. But there is a social and a community and a sense of well-being that comes that you can't really put dollars on. When you have a world full of renters, nobody takes care of the front yard, right? And so there's value in home ownership, but it's your biggest purchase maybe, but it's not your biggest asset, okay? As far as on the other side, he's a real big promoter of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ideas. But the vast majority of the population are not entrepreneurs and are frightened of the future. Okay. And so he poo-poos the idea of getting a college education and then an administrative job at a school district or something. Well, someone has to do that job and you want good people in that position, right?
Yep.
So not everybody's an entrepreneur. Not everybody can take the risks of coming behind an entrepreneur, right? And so it is hyperbolic, but it really sets up camps that I think are harmful. But again, like I said, I would agree. Your home is not an asset for a long time until you sell it. But then you still have to buy somewhere. You still have to live somewhere.
So
right?
So home equity is part of the pitch with him, and business equity and all of that.
I don't know.
You don't know
the rest of the pitch is. He just doesn't like anything standard. And there are things that there's standard advice that I don't agree with, right? Okay. The standard advice that your home is your biggest and most important asset, right? Well, maybe. Yeah. And then stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. I mean, that's the standard thing that 90+% of the people can access, and they can play a part in the economy. Very few people can be angel investors for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul. You talked about the entrepreneurial mindset. We could go into that in future episodes, but just dialing it back to, hey, somebody's got to keep this economy going, right? This economy, which one? The world economy, but we're sitting in the U.S., so don't we all have a part to play, right? And is my part more important than your part? Should you just do everything my way?
Oh, never.
Okay. Well, I sure hope you don't, by the way. It's not a long, windy gravel road, but, the bottom line is, don't we have gifts to contribute, all of us?
Of course.
And roles to play and callings to fulfill. And that is where a lot of us in finance, frankly, are very forgetful. And that starts with me as it relates to what is it I'm called to? What is it I'm good at? Right? What are the things that I can contribute? Right? So that's the conversation I'd love to have as time goes on. But thank you, Chaz. This was a lot of fun.
There you go.
Yeah. So, so we're on to the regular part of ASV, the most important part for today, our core content. What we want to do is, just dial back for a little bit or maybe dial in. Let's call it dialing in, because we're going to be very specific here about giving, right? The topic of giving, and giving is a big, broad umbrella that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Those who are Christians, those who are not, those who are tax or legal or financial pros, those who are not, those who come at it with a technical mind, and those who don't. So I'm not going to attempt to, kind of pull together all the different aspects of what giving is, but let's just say we're starting with the umbrella. We're diving into what are the ways, and I'll reference last August when we talked about the biggest financial risk that a family has, right, which is a failed wealth transfer. So what are the ways that we can be stewards of our giving? Okay, so, to not have a failed wealth transfer would be the de minimis kind of effort in this, right? But to, dialing it up a few notches to do what? To glorify the provider of that which we have, right? That which is not ours, right? And how we proceed with what we give at church, or maybe what we dare keep, right? Probably the latter if Paul's sitting here, and he is. So, in fact, even if you're not sitting here, Paul. So let's talk about that. Technically speaking, there are very finite ways to give assets anywhere, right? Which is why the first question needs to be, if I may say, and this is about as black and white as I get on the topic, who's supposed to benefit, right? So if you know who's supposed to benefit, whether you have, 5 or 10 or 50 or $100 million, or are we about to create a trillionaire now, right? And we have how many billionaires? Maybe Paul, we can ask ChatGPT. Remember the zeros involved, right? But especially if you're over 15 million in the U.S. as it relates to current law, that's a very specific question that has to be answered. Why? Because we're then dealing with the interaction between income taxes and estate taxes. Okay, and they're two different tax systems that have to get navigated. Okay, at the very front end of all that, one of the things you can do, and I'm assuming, by the way, that this question has been answered, right? Who's supposed to benefit? So before I go there, let me just clarify. There are really only two places that we can give, right? To others or to charities. Okay. Which others? Any others?
Or to the government.
Right? Well, sure. I mean, yes. Okay. Would that be intentional giving?
Somebody is given to Elon Musk, because I looked that up for you. First trillionaire.
Okay.
He's projected to be the first trillionaire by 2027, just so you know.
Fascinating. By
So we're giving him
2027.
some money
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on where Tesla stock is then. And it's been off. It's off a little bit.
Tesla stock. But what about the SpaceX IPO? I mean, that's what's
Yeah, it
driving
says
it.
SpaceX,
Right.
Tesla, and XAI.
But his bonus, his Tesla bonus is based on.
Okay. All right. So it's all the above. It is a combination of things, no doubt. But, the comment being, what, first of all, I had a business partner that would focus on this a lot in a past part of my career, and I loved it right from Stephen Covey, beginning with the end in mind, right? Who's supposed to benefit, right? Who is it? People in your family? Is it others? Is it, certain causes? Okay. So charitable gifts. Okay. It could be a combination, but what we don't want to do is say, well, and I touched on this in our legacy series, right? I'm going to get right into the mechanics. Okay. I'm going to have, my will, maybe a trust. Okay. And I'll have my healthcare directives, my powers of attorney, and my, whatever else drafted. And yep, I got a plan. Nope. You have a structure for a plan. So the issue becomes like seeing forward from a heart standpoint, who has God put in my life? What is it that I view as the end of my life? What legacy do I want to leave? Right. We've talked about that, but then, okay, now we pull in the numbers and go, I've got these resources available. I've got this dynamic puzzle box that I get to work with. So how am I going to allocate that? Right. And the two different tax systems are critically important because, on the one hand, we don't want to overpay either one. Right. On the other hand, we need to make sure that the right beneficiaries are benefiting optimally as well. Right. So as an example, families with, I would just call it high wealth, anything, in the realm of 30 million and above, that's my own personal opinion. When they go to craft a trust, the question isn't, how many trusts do you need, or do you need a trust? It's how many trusts do you need, right? And especially when you get above 30 million, right? I'll say it that way. So then, and I'm assuming, again, have they identified the people involved, the kids and the grandkids, let's say, right? Maybe the charity. What is the current income tax picture, right, as it relates to cash flow and the need there for managing liability, right, in the short term, right? But then again, this longer term picture. And by the way, estates, we can grow an estate. I mean, sorry, Robert Kiyosaki, but near 4% a year is a realistic expectation, right? Is that because the largest asset is the home? No, not really. That's because that's generally what a an estate grows at when you combine all assets in a U.S. household anyway, and that's a historical like 30-year plus figure. So we can nitpick on the 4% thing, but the point is that we've got 30 or 40 or 50 years, however many years left to get to the end, right? Assuming there's no tragedy or early demise of a person or a household. And so we got to project with those increases as well, right? So personally, I don't project, in my planning practice, I don't project above 10 years. I prefer to talk about 5. That's just a realistic way to actually put our heads around what's happening now and kind of extrapolate. But we do have to make decisions with that end in mind. And we do have to make some calls about, let's take the $50 million estate, right? All right. Well, the $15 million estate tax exemption applies to one person. So if I have 2 people, a couple, right? Let's call it a first marriage to keep it simple. And they can now shelter $30 million if we craft the right trust with the right language. And that's a, revocable trust, by the way, typically. And then after that, they have to decide just based on today, right? Not even including the future, right? The unknowns of the estate tax legislation, but this 4% thing I mentioned, right? The growth factor, whatever we choose, they're going to have to say, okay, well, what am I going to do with the rest? We don't need it. All right. Well, how do we know we don't need it? Well, because we ran a cash flow projection and looked at our expenses and our dynamic puzzle box in the short run. So now the kids and grandkids, oh, but wait, but so-and-so has some special needs. Oh, but so-and-so is a spendthrift. Oh, but we don't know if this kid is going to have kids, right? And so pretty soon there's all these complexities. And so knowing who's supposed to benefit, and then, back to the heart, Paul, right? What am I called to? Okay. And I'm leaving off charitable giving here just for a moment. And I focused on the family in that example, but how can we know?
How can we know?
How can we know? What are we called to? How can we know what's supposed to happen? How can we know who the beneficiaries are to be?
Well, we can't know what's going to happen. And we can't know the ultimate when you say who the beneficiaries are. Some beneficiaries, you're really benefiting the Corvette store and Prada. You're not benefiting that kid, right? Because right out, you get the money and off they are buying a sports car, right? So
you mean the spendthrift?
Well, or someone who doesn't think they are, right?
Sure.
So
of course.
Yeah, there's always a question who ultimately benefits. You have your goals and you have your desires, and to the extent that you have built a culture of communication in your family, those are important considerations. Also, who is going to leverage that legacy? You talked last week about the parable of the talents. Okay, those talents didn't have to be given at all. That was that was the master's choice. But he did give them based on abilities. Okay. Now we don't want to read too much into a parable that Jesus doesn't dwell on a long time. Okay. So we want to be careful about what we do with parables, but it is kind of interesting that the master wasn't compelled at all. And it's just a story, that he gave that based on ability. Well, perhaps these trusts need to be managed, and the ultimate beneficiary gets a dividend on something that another beneficiary invested in and created. Right there, when we talked about legacy, one of the things I brought up is the difference between a thriving person or a thriving family, and a flourishing person or family. And a lot of times the difference is mindset or time frame. Because you should say, well, I did it 40 years. I overcame all these obstacles and I got all this money and I can endow a wing at the hospital and I can make it so my kids never have to work again. Well, maybe you thrived, but did you flourish?
And did your kids flourish?
Yeah. The flourishing mindset says, what do I put in place now that people are thankful for in 100 years or 120 years after my children are dead and their grandchildren are old? So having that kind of a flourishing, who's brought along during this? Okay. Not just who was well kept. And so these are questions of the heart. They're questions that have to be answered from a spiritual mindset and with lots of counsel. Okay. But at first blush, when you're doing estate planning, who's supposed to benefit? That's a really good question. But to try to dig out who you're going to actually benefit, no matter how hard you work, you really ultimately don't have control over who benefits. It might be the divorced wife of your son, right? So anyway, or the divorced wife's attorney of your son. So we do what we can with what we know. We can't be certain. We have to leave it in God's hands. And so it's good to look to him for advice. But there's not a Bible verse that'll tell you that. And we looked at Proverbs, I don't know, a month or two ago. See, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children. A wicked man leaves a bunch of money. How do you how do you process that? Right? Well, the inheritance the good man left was a good name, a good example, a good training. That's what a good man, that's the inheritance, whether he's got any money or not. So these are all issues surrounding this. And so when we ask some of these questions, if people need time to listen to think about them, that's certainly fair, right?
Yeah, and considering we want to know where our hearts are at. I guess that's what I was trying to get at in the first place. Is examining ourselves, right? Knowing where's my heart at right now when it comes to these decisions. Okay, what is it that I'm called to, right? How is it that I can best honor or best steward the relationships and future needs to the extent I can anticipate them, right? And so those are all considerations on the art part of giving, right? And the science part, and especially when we get into charitable giving, I mean, there are technicalities to do with income and estate tax planning that I'm afraid would put people to sleep if I got too far into them. But lots and lots of detail that take many hours to piece together and then apart and then back together. I just want to make a point to say that when you get into the upper net worth echelon, you've got to consider both, and you've got to consider that retirement and estate planning are on a teeter-totter, right? Because of the two different tax systems. Okay. And I didn't even mention the EMT, right? So that's some thoughts about giving from a family's view or to other individuals. When we talk about charitable giving, I do want to touch on that. And I think what we could do, Paul, for next time is dive more into some of the technical pieces of this. But I want to mention that charitable planning is a very wide open opportunity for anybody that has charitable intent, right? What does that mean? Well, you want to give money to somebody other than individuals. You want to give it to charities. Okay. We're talking about nonprofits, 501c3s. We're talking about giving assets completely, right? A completed gift out of your estate, right? Your living estate while you're alive, probably could be after death. Okay. Either one. But there are a few different opportunities for that, one of which we'll touch on in this episode. So donor advised funds are a very commonly used tool for that purpose. And I want to talk about what they are in a moment, but also charitable trusts and foundations. So charitable trusts and foundations, charitable trusts, these are generally irrevocable trusts that have a charity benefiting either at the beginning or at the end of the life of the trust. Okay. And little or no control retained by the grantors, those who are contributing to that trust and receiving typically some income tax benefit that's substantial, right, for those contributions. Okay. So that's charitable trust. They're a very finite mechanical tool we can talk about. And I'd actually like to. I think there are some neat things there. Foundations, they are as highly customized as the people, the individuals and the professionals that start them. Okay. But that they're more the stuff for family offices, as I would explain it. I think it's amazing what you can do with a private foundation in terms of charitable efforts, right? You could go look at what Mackenzie Scott, who's been just doing so many good things with from the post-divorce picture with Jeff Bezos, and how she's I would argue stewarded the assets that she received from that divorce process. Okay. So that's an example. She has a charitable foundation that she's working with that's going out and, investigate, almost like a portfolio manager would, investigating, what are these different charities? What are they really doing? What are their actual needs? And then something about, the number, right? And then making a decision. So that's because it's so customized and it's so specific to the donors that are setting those up. I don't see that there's a lot of fruit in this program for us there, but I do want to come back to both donor advised funds and charitable trusts. For now, let me just say this. A donor advised fund is like a master charity, right? So it's going to take a gift of cash, a gift of real estate, a gift of securities. So Robert Kiyosaki might be happy, okay, to have an opportunity to give, private business equity even, or real estate to a donor advised fund, or a DAF, a DAF. Now, there are lots of providers or sponsors of these DAFs. I won't go into names, but each of them is a little bit unique in terms of the fees they charge. So sorry, Robert, there's a cost to this. But then you say, okay, once I get an asset in the DAF, okay, well, let's talk about getting the asset there. So I'm going to make a contribution to this master charity, right? It's going to be called the Way Loud Charitable Fund, or the Louder Family Charity. Okay, charitable fund.
Sounds good.
And okay, so we're going to make this contribution, and in the current year, we're going to seek to have some income tax benefit in the form of a deduction for the assets that went in. Now, there are limitations on what can go in terms of what's deductible, right, as it relates to your adjusted gross income for a given year. And we'll come back to this next week. But, for example, this is one example. I'm not going to say I've got them all in my back pocket, but a 30% limitation of AGI on securities gifted, right? So I'm in a world where I have a lot of people say, oh, I want a deduction going in, but I don't want to, overdo it from a tax standpoint. So they may or may not be doing it for the tax benefit to begin with. That's between them and God, as we're getting to in this episode. But they are saying, hey, I could give more next year or the year after that. So if I've got $100,000 and I can only benefit from giving 50 this year, right, because of what my adjusted gross income is expected to be in the current year, or for this year's filing, then I'll go ahead and I'll give the 50 this year and 50 next year. So there are limitations, as with cash, as with anything you put into these. But the beautiful thing about them is that once the asset is there, you get to say, okay, I'm going to involve my family, maybe some people that are close to me, and I'm going to make some decisions as time goes on. The phrase donor advised fund, I'm the donor. I'm going to advise the fund on which, and I'll call them sub charities for the sake of conversation, which end charities or sub charities we're going to give to out of this master charity that we set up. Okay. Only it's not a charity per se. It's a charitable fund, right? It's a donor advised fund. So it's a pool, and it's a very neat, flexible way to spend, get the benefits up front, right? In a year where you really may need it. Right. And then talk about that. You have high income years. These are a great tool. I don't need it 3 years from now, but the next two, man, I'm going to give that 100,000, right? That 50 and 50. And then I'm going to spend time. Maybe the next 5 years, I give away $20,000 a year in value out of this thing to whatever the, beneficial charities is another way to say it, whatever the end charities are that are going to receive it. So that's a neat tool that I can't say enough about from a year-over-year income tax planning standpoint in terms of what? In terms of flexibility, right? Very easy to administer. They receive lots of different kinds of assets. And they also, while they do have some limitations, they allow flexibility on the ultimate transfer of wealth to the end charities. So, unless you're trying to give money to, a a startup mission in a country that no one's ever heard of. Usually the master charity, because these are major sponsors. Okay. And again, I'm intentionally not naming names, but they will have a very long list of 501c3s that can be considered to be, given to by the donors. So that's a thought for right now. I could give an example or two if it's helpful, but Paul, any other thoughts about, this concept of charitable giving in general, maybe donor advised funds? Again, we're kind of coming back to charitable trusts next week.
Well, you're right. The DAF structure is very convenient for really kind of anybody, anybody charitably inclined, as opposed to the overhead of a foundation and the multi-generation aspect of it. It's very easy for the founding family to lose control of the ethic or the ethos of that charity, right? I heard someone say once, doing your giving while you're living, so you're knowing where it's going. Okay, well, there's some value in that. And even if your donor advised fund outlives you, if you've had that chance to work with your kids, family members, and so there's an opportunity to you're not in a hurry to make the donation. You're just being strategic as to when you pile the money up. And so over time, you've got an opportunity to maintain some continuity on the ethos.
Yeah. And so, so helpful just to think about who's supposed to benefit. Is it individuals in my life, probably family, or is it, a charitable intent that I have? Okay. I want to add something to this particular episode because I feel like it may be a gap. And then I know we have to wrap for today, Paul, but I'm going to move a little bit back into the art and really the heart of this. You and I were talking earlier today about how, God doesn't really need our help. He doesn't really need us to give him what's already his. Okay. He doesn't need help, accomplishing glory for himself. Right. So how do we navigate that then when it comes to what we dare keep?
That's a good question. How are we stewarding any of it? Right. But actually, I think the giving part is just a declaration. It's a form of worship. It's a declaration that I'm counting on the Lord to meet my needs and bring me joy.
So
right?
it's not a percentage of income then.
No, not
it's not having a good expense budget.
That would be too easy and too simple. And quite frankly, since we're all fundamentally Pharisees, that'd be very convenient. If I could give you a percentage, a number, a checkbox, that's not working out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's not being available to the Spirit. That's not even, over time, that's not even joyful giving. Well, I set this up 5 years ago, and oh, here's another check I got to write because I promised some pastor somewhere that I would always give this much money, right? And you don't want to be flighty with it. You don't want to be fooling people. If you've made representations and they're making plans around them, that's not unimportant. You don't want to derail that. But that joyful, cheerfulness in our giving, that's got a backside to it. And there are some warnings. And that doesn't mean you stop giving. Maybe what it means is you get on your knees and pray that the Lord would give you a cheerful heart around it. All right. So that's why we need each other. Okay. That's why we need to open ourselves up to other people. We need to share these questions, concerns, look for advice. We're part of a living, breathing body. and our faith doesn't end at age 80, right? Things just get started. So that's, I think that would be an important thing to remember, that we're walking through this in faith every step.
We can't see all the outcomes or control them.
Absolutely not. No. But you can't allow God's going to, like you said, accomplish his purposes. Now, they might be through you or they might be in spite of you. So at different times in your life, It might be through you, and it might be in spite of you. So to be eager that the Spirit advises you as to how God can do his purposes through you. That's a much better side of the equation to be on.
Amen. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've got a week or two yet to go in this conversation called The Art and Science of Giving. And so I want to continue that entire piece about charitable giving next week, but also stay on this conversation, the bigger one about the heart of what we're doing. So we've covered a lot of ground. Chaz, unless you have anything else.
I will encourage our listeners, our viewers, if you have any questions about our noise segment or anything that Aaron or Paul have talked about today, email us, team@astewardsview.com.
Very well said. And so this has just been a joy. It's great to be back. I hope this session has been a blessing to you and to others you decide to share it with. From all of us at ASV, we look forward to what's ahead. The remainder of April, as I said, will continue the art and science of giving with special guest Paul Larsen. Until next week's episode, then, let's regroup. Let's get back to stewardsview.com. You can look at the whole last year's worth of episodes and the wisdom that we endeavor to bring to you. And just learn from that and grow from that and share that. So I look forward to connecting with you there as well at stewardsview.com. And until then, please do be wise and decide well.
You've been listening to A Steward's View. To learn more about Fidare Advisors or speak with Aaron, visit fidareadvice.com. That's FIDERE advice.com. To listen to this and other episodes of A Steward's View, visit astewardsview.com. A Steward's View is brought to you by Fidare Advisors, a registered investment advisor offering financial planning and asset aggregation. Asset aggregation systems are designed to align portfolios across accounts into a single, globally optimized investment plan for families it serves. Fidare maintains liquidity of client capital at major custodians and utilizes asset managers that have shown consistent historical performance through excellent risk management. This program is not an offer to transact any securities and does not constitute a financial planning engagement. Information provided has been prepared from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed and does not represent all available data necessary for making financial decisions and is for informational purposes only. Fidare and its representatives do not offer tax or legal advice through Fidare. Please consult the appropriate advisor. Fidare Advisors LLC is a registered investment advisor. To discuss your situation or to learn more about Fidare, please visit fidareadvice.com. That's FIDERE advice.com.